and she's the Director of Engineering over at Mostly Serious. And she's going to tell us a little bit about accessibility audits in Chrome.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Can you hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, awesome. Is everyone still awake? I know we're hitting that mid-afternoon slump, but give me a raise of the hand if you're awake. Okay, good. Okay, we can move on then. So as Jordan mentioned, my name is Miranda, and I'm the Director of Engineering at Mostly Serious. We are a digital agency that helps clients find their voice and reach their audience. So what this looks like most times is that we help them build a website or an application with accessibility in mind. I'm also the co-founder of the Geek Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that's trying to make tech education more readily available so that you don't have to go all the way through a 4-year or 2-year program just to get some help in learning how to code. And we want to do all of that with a focus on diversity. So helping women and people of color find their way into this field and join all of the wonderful people that are already here today. So just want to start from a high level. I know that we have people here from a wide variety of backgrounds, beginners to experts in their field, but even an expert might not necessarily know what accessibility is, what it means, or why we want to do it. So just want to start with a quote from the creator of the World Wide Web, Tim Berners-Lee. "The power of the web is in its universality. Access by everyone, regardless of disability, is an essential aspect." So the most amazing thing about the internet is its ability to level the playing field, right? Pretty much anyone can get loads of information about whatever they want to learn and better themselves and empower themselves as long as they have that connection. So the idea here with accessibility is making sure that anyone has that access. And as we can see here with this quote, that idea has been baked into the internet since its very beginnings. So when we're talking about accessibility, we want to kind of think about the groups that that accessibility affects, or lack of accessibility affects. So the most obvious group here is people with visual impairments. The World Health Organization estimates that 285 million people worldwide have low or reduced vision, and 39 million of those people are completely blind. So we all take it for granted, right, that we ingest all of the information from our computers with our eyes for the most part. And there are ways for us to build apps, websites, all kinds of software that allow people with no vision to be able to use these same things like we do. So the next group is people with hearing impairments. This kind of lives in the realm of making sure that video and audio have captions and transcripts. So we see this all the time, right? Like you can turn your captions on for Netflix, maybe just because your roommate's being loud. And so the cool thing about accessibility too and helping these groups of people is that they help everyday people too when they're in a scenario where they can't, use the normal viewing experience. So that kind of leads me to the next one here, mobility impairments. So we, again, all take it kind of for granted that we can use a mouse or a trackpad or whatever that lets us point and click at the screen. But some people don't have that ability. Maybe it's a permanent issue like, they don't have a hand. Or maybe it's a temporary thing like I broke my arm and I can't, use a mouse. So when we're talking about this category of people, we just want to make sure that everything that we build can be navigable with a keyboard only. And so that means when you're tabbing through content on the site, you can get to everything, you can navigate to everything. And also when you're filling out a form, that people can do that solely with a keyboard as well. The last category up here has to do with cognitive impairments. So probably the most common thing we can think of, we probably all know somebody that has dyslexia. That would fall under this category. And that's, of course, when people get letters and words jumbled up or mixed around. And there are things that we can do, practices that we can all do that are pretty simple that can help people in this category use the internet better. And the bonus group, that's not represented here, is the power user, which raise your hand if you consider yourself a power user. Yeah. So these practices that we're talking about here help everyone, which is awesome. So I want to do something a little different. I want to paint the picture of someone doing something on the internet that all of us take for granted, and paint the picture of a world where this happens in an ideal way. So please indulge me. Close your eyes if you feel comfortable. I'm going to paint a story for you. So you're in your living room, relaxing on your couch. You see darkness. Maybe a hint of light when you turn your head to the window, but otherwise nothing. But your other senses are firmly intact. You hear the pitter-patter of your corgi's paws on the hardwood floor, maybe some incessant whining if it's anything like my corgi. You feel the soft, squishy fabric of the couch underneath you. You smell the potpourri that your mom brought last night, and you hear your stomach start to grumble. So you decide to order some of your favorite food. You guessed it, a nice greasy pizza. Yeah. So you do what any normal American does when they're in need of some za. You get on your computer and you order it online. As a blind person, you use the help of a screen reader to read content from the screen. And because you're fancy AF, you use the voice of a British accent. So, your British robot is reading you your options, and in this ideal world, you can use your keyboard to make your selections, enter your payment information, and get to that sweet, sweet Domino's tracker, all without being able to see a thing. 20 to 30 minutes pass, and voila, you have pizza all to yourself without having to bother another soul. Something that we all take for granted. So, you can go ahead and open your eyes and join me back in the real world for your pizza. So, that being in mind, we can all now a little bit better understand the perspective of someone who's in this boat. So I think we're all motivated now to make some difference, right? How do we know when we hit the mark? What we use is the Web Accessibility Content Guidelines, or the WCAG. And they kind of split this up into 3 categories: single A, double A, and triple A, which is basically a good, better, best approach. The bulk of the requirements are in the first level, A. And then with double A and triple A, things get a little bit more prescriptive, a little bit harder to do exactly what you want. But the point of this whole presentation and the point of accessibility in general is we should all do as much as we can. Whether that's not even hitting the first mark and just taking one step, that's better than nothing, or if it's getting all the way up to triple A level. So the thing that sticks out to me the most when we're looking at the difference between these levels here is in regard to color contrast. And this is kind of one of the things where if you hear designers maybe push back on this stuff, this might be where they might be a little bit more concerned. So for double A, there are rules for contrast, which is the difference between the foreground text and the background text. And for double A, it has to be 4.5 to 1. So the text in the foreground needs to be 4.5 times darker than the text or than the background, or vice versa. And so when you get to AAA, that contrast ratio requirement leaps to 7 to 1. So a little bit harder to make it happen, but the whole point of this is that you can do a lot of good with a little bit. And most people's computers allow you to increase the contrast level, so that's not, even the biggest barrier to people. So we know what to look for or where to go for reference, which, by the way, I have a link up here, which I guess I need to share my slides for anyone to get it, but feel free to reach out to me or just Google it, because that's what we all do anyway. So we know what to look for, but how do we test all this stuff? Well, we use a screen reader. And a screen reader is assistive technology that reads digital content to the blind by then translating to audio or to a Braille device. So I'm gonna let you hear what this sounds like. Probably some of you have never done this before. oops, gotta click up here. 1 second. There we go. Technical difficulties. All right, so this is the Geek Foundation website, and I'm just gonna turn the screen reader on. I'm just using the built-in Mac OS screen reader called VoiceOver. It's pretty good, does what you need it to do. If you're on a Windows machine or if you just wanna try something different, there are lots of different versions. And unfortunately, just like building a website in the browser, not all screen readers function exactly alike. So, if you want to get complete coverage, you have to test in a lot of different areas. But again, this is not about perfection. If you can just go through your site with one screen reader, you're doing a world of good for people who have low vision. So, I'm going to turn it on.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen.
Got it. Okay.
VoiceOver on Chrome, Google Chrome, Jordan L, window, we visited and labeled image. To get the CM's descriptions, open the context menu. Banner, link, what we do. Primary link, we are.
So I'm just
You are currently on a link. To click this link, press Control, Option, Space.
Awesome, that's good enough. Thank you very much for your service, VoiceOver. We'll come back to you later.
VoiceOver off.
Thank you. So as you can hear, it's just reading stuff to us in our lovely British robot voice, which I love. And that's, how people without vision get by and how they do things on the internet. Okay. So before we move on and get into demo time, I just want to call out once again that there is no such thing as 100% accessibility, and you really don't even need to strive for it. Just like other Miranda was talking about earlier today, like good is good. We don't have to be perfect. But the whole goal of this is to give you just some visuals on easy steps toward accessibility. So maybe even 5% of the way is a great start and is helping people for real. Okay, so I'm gonna, again, take you through just something really easy, something you might not have even known or picked up on that's in the browser that most of us use every day and is conveniently well-fitting for a Google DevFest conference, Chrome. So let's do it. Again, we're back on the Geek Foundation website. And before we get going, has anyone heard of Brene Brown? Anyone a fan? Yeah, a few of you here. So Brene Brown is amazing. She talks about the power of vulnerability and how dangerous it is for us to feel shame and to perpetuate and spread that to other people. So in the spirit of no shame, we are going to do an audit of the Geek Foundation's website, a website that I commissioned to be built before I knew a thing about accessibility and have not done anything as of yet, or only taken baby steps to improve it. But in the spirit of learning, it's just a great way for us to see what's wrong and how could we make some quick steps to improve it. So I'm gonna go ahead and get the audit going. No, different Mac. So just opening up our DevTools, we'll find the Audits tab over here. And there's lots of good stuff in here. Can you see that okay? Is it big enough? I mean, yeah. Yeah, it's big enough. So, we've got, we can switch to desktop here. We're just kind of looking at desktop right now, although this whole topic of accessibility does apply in both cases. But for now, just for speed's sake, we're gonna nix these other audits and just stick with accessibility. We don't care about throttling right now. We just want to go fast. So here you can see Lighthouse is warming up, gathering information. Beautiful. Ooh, and I swear this score is even lower than it was 5 minutes ago. Don't know how that happened, but here we are. Again, 47, not the kind of score I'm ever going to write home about. But we're here to learn, so that's what we're doing. I wonder, we'll deal with it. So I'm just going to take you through a few of these and show you simple things that you can do to fix them for the most part. This first one here is talking about contrast ratio here. So background and foreground colors do not have a sufficient contrast ratio. And if we click around on some of these, so that's the text here. This is the button here. And because our color palette is, just middle of the road, pink salmon color, and we're putting white and charcoal text on it, we're not hitting sufficient contrast ratio here. So there are things that we can do. We can take a different approach. And when you make text bigger, you can sometimes get the contrast ratio requirements get a little bit less intense. So this one is kind of something we have to think about a little bit. I'm going to move on to the next one. This is something we can fix really quickly. Image elements do not have all attributes. So probably most people on the web know what an all attribute is. And in fact, when I was first introduced to it, it was all in the realm of SEO because I work at an agency. And so I was like, oh, you use all attributes to get more, SEO power, right? Well, no, that's not really the original intention of an all attribute. What it's really meant is to describe the image for people that can't see it. So let's use our screen reader to see what it has to say about this image right here. And bear with the voices.
Welcome to VoiceOver. VoiceOver speaks descriptions of items on the screen.
VoiceOver on Chrome. Selected. Link. Contact us. Contact us to get involved. You are currently on a link. To click this link, press Control Option Space.
So I'm going to navigate to this next element, which is the image, and we're going to see what it says to us about what it is.
/computer GIF unlabeled image. You are currently on an unlabeled image.
So not extra helpful.
VoiceOver off.
The computer, describing it as a computer is somewhat helpful, and what VoiceOver does by default is it reads the file name to you, which may or may not be helpful at all, right? Most of us aren't necessarily thinking about the file name being helpful when we're uploading it to our site or when we're using it on our site. So really what we want to do is describe that image and fully explain what is it doing. So we should be able to just do this in DevTools real quick. So I'm going to say this is an animation. It's so hard to type in front of people. An animation of children curiously looking at a computer that has code on it. Yeah, so that's descriptive. And then if we do this again,
VoiceOver on Chrome, Google Chrome, Jordan L, Window, DevFest, link, contact us, ability, link, contact us, an animation of children curiously looking at a computer that has code on it, image.
Beautiful.
You are currently on an image.
So now someone who can't see knows what we're
VoiceOver off.
in this image, and we're making a world of difference for them by doing this. So for any of you that are like me and you have a content management system or CMS behind any website that you build, some of this is in the hands of the client or the person that's populated the content, which is not usually you. So what we can do in this case is just make sure that we always have a field available for someone to specify an alt image attribute, and do the best that we can to train people on how to describe your images and why it matters. Okay, so moving on to the next thing. Form elements do not have associated labels. So this guy's down here. And as you can see, we're following a very common practice in the web these days, which is to not have a label on your input element. And people who know the HTML5 spec really well know that you're technically supposed to have some sort of label. And the reason is that people who are interacting with this who can't see and again are using a screen reader need to know what the hell they're putting their email address into, or rather that they even need to input their email at all. Otherwise, all they're going to see, you know, is this sign up button and wonder like, what am I supposed to do? So simple solution to this, we could just add a label. Or, I mean, rather add some text in our label that already exists, but we didn't put anything in there. Maybe some CSS to style it up, make it all pretty. When the screen reader goes through this, it's going to tell the user that it's an input field, a text field that requires an email address. And, you know, there's also all kinds of other good HTML stuff that gets read to you with a screen reader when you're using the proper things. So you see this required attribute right here too. If we had the screen reader read this to us, it would tell us that that is a required field, which is extra helpful. So, you know, these things go a long way. Next thing up. Links do not have a discernible name. So we're gonna check out this one at the bottom. That is this Twitter icon right here. Yeah. And again, another common thing, we use icons to convey meaning, and for people with eyes, it works, right? But for people who don't have functioning eyes, who can't see like we can see, this is meaningless. So they have no idea what they're doing or where they're going if they fall on that link. So one thing that we can do to remediate this is use the ARIA, the ARIA label attribute. Very challenging. So we'll just call it the Geek Foundation Twitter. Beautiful. Well, it didn't take. Yes, it did.
You didn't have a code.
Okay. That gonna work? Hopefully it won't complain about this messy stuff over here. Okay. So now if we check this out with the screen reader.
Chrome busy. VoiceOver on Chrome. Code leaving table. Link. Info link. Selected. Link. The Duke visited link. The Geek Foundation tighter. You are currently on a link. To click this link, press Control Option Space.
Thank you for that voiceover. You've done your job.
F5 button.
Wonderful. So that's just a few examples.
Audits selected. Tab 9 of 11 panels.
There we go.
VoiceOver off.
Okay. Those are just a few like super easy examples. They only take a second to fix. But the more we can think about this as we're coding, whether it's a web or software or mobile apps, the more we can think about these things and just make them native to what we're doing, we're helping people without even realizing it, which is amazing. So I just want to briefly take you through some of these other things, again, just to get your eyes on them so that it feels natural to you. The cool thing about this audit tool is that you can just learn so much using it alone. So we can check out some of these things that passed. Actually, that's the wrong one. Here we go. We can check out some of these things that passed. So the page contains heading, skip link, or landmark region. And when they say landmark region, they mean things like the main tag or section, article, aside, navigation, header, footer, things that describe where we are in a page. So when we use those elements, the screen reader will give a person an option to skip through content. So when we think about like the way that people have to go through this stuff is they have to tab through it all, they have to key through it all. Because they can't visually jump down. So the more we give them options to skip around and move a little bit faster, the better things go for them. So some of this stuff too, again, is just following web best practices. Document has a title attribute. ID attributes on the page are unique. HTML element has a lang attribute and one that's valid. And then this last one here is saying that user scalable equals no is not used in the meta viewport tag. That's a simple thing to do, but basically we want to make sure that the person can increase the size of their page or decrease it with the native things that are built in. And if we tell the browser that it can't be scalable, that's obviously going to be a problem for people who need the text to be a little bit bigger. There's also a bunch of stuff here that's not applicable. I won't go through that now, but again, it's just a good opportunity for learning for everyone. So coming back up here, it talks about 11 additional items to manually check. And the reason it talks about this is because, unfortunately, an automated testing tool can't get us all the way there. Some of it at this point in time still takes a human to do. We can't let our British robots do it for us, unfortunately. So again, just want you to get visuals on this stuff so you know where to go and you know where to look. I'm just going to follow this link and talk you through some of this stuff. So this article here is how to do an accessibility review. It talks about automatic stuff and manual, but it's a good way to just a comprehensive covering of all the things to check. So the first point here is start with the keyboard. And I've talked about this a little bit, but the idea is that you should be able to tab through all the interactive elements on your site, whether it's a link, a button, or a form element, something like that. So I just want to show you an example because we know that the Key Foundation website is not the best example right now. I'm going to show you one that is. Is that right? Yeah, okay. So DQ is also an excellent resource for accessibility tools and tips. And we're going to see some really awesome things that they're doing for people with reduced vision when we tab through the site. So let me start over. I have to accept cookies or decline. Jordan, what do you want to do? Beautiful. So I did all of that with a keyboard, no mouse so far. And now I just keep tabbing and you'll see that this popped up. Skip to content. So this is, again, an amazing tool for people to be able to just skip over with a keyboard. Because if I kept tabbing, I'm going to have to go all the way through the menu. And while their menu is not that big, sometimes menus are really big. And giving them the skip to content anchor is really helpful. So all that's happening here is it's just an anchor tag that's hidden off the page, not actually hidden, but skewed off the page until it's in focus, and then we show it. And then when it's out of focus, we hide it again. But if we, hit enter or space, different computer, it is supposed to take us down here to the main content. So again, we're here in the focus. Another thing that we want to do in terms of making things keyboard accessible is we need to show people when something's in focus. So we can't really navigate without knowing where we are. And the idea is that we need to have focus styling for everything that's on a page. And probably some of you are familiar with the standard blue fuzzy outline. Yeah, have you seen the blue fuzzy outline that's on a lot of sites? So that's the default built-in thing, and it might look a little bit different from browser to browser, but for Chrome, it's the blue fuzzy outline. And a lot of us, because we didn't know any better, we remove all that stuff by default, which we didn't realize, the impact that that's having on people. So if we want to have the best of both worlds, we can make our own focus styling, and DQ has done an excellent job here. I really like what they've done. So instead of having a blue fuzzy outline, they have these little bars that are living inside of the buttons, which is amazing. And you can see that just keeps going on as we tab down the page. Awesome. So another quick, easy trick for the people on the web, at least, is most of us already have hover styles because, again, web best practices, specify that we show people something that's interactive. So when we hover over something, it needs to be obvious that something can happen, right? The style needs to change. And so the easiest way to get focus styling is just anytime you have a hover selector, also specify a focus selector within that same CSS rule. Okay, so that's just a high-level overview on keyboard. The next tip they have here is using it with a screen reader. They're covering things that we kind of already talked about with alt tags and using ARIA label, which you can use that property on any element, and you can change the way that that's represented or read out loud, which can be really helpful for people. If you want to take this like all the way and be a super stud, you can try it with a screen reader blindfold, because that's how the people are actually doing it. That's a big commitment, but that would truly get you in the mindset of how these people are using it. So next thing on here is about interactive elements. So links and buttons and anything that you can interact with or click on. And again, this is just making sure there are hover focus styles, and then also making sure that you can focus on all of them and use them with a keyboard. Take advantage of headings and landmarks. We touched on this a bit already too, but just using the built-in HTML elements that fit the content that you're using so that people can jump around. Another thing here is that we should use headings in a consistent manner, and they should nest under their levels, not just jump around kind of willy-nilly. And the last thing is about automation. I'll leave that up to you to read, but I also have a few bonus tips for you too. So for the people that already know all about Chrome's audits, use it, or already have something that they're doing and thinking about this stuff, I wanted to include a few other automated tools that can take your work to the next level. So the first thing here is Axe, which was actually built by DQ. And it has tools for web, Windows, iOS, and Android. I really like Microsoft's Accessibility Insights. It's a new thing. I think I only heard about it, 4 or 5 months ago, but it is everything. So Chrome's tool is a little bit lightweight, which is nice when you're starting out. But if you want to make sure that you've got everything, this thing is awesome. I've used the browser extension, and they basically give you all the guidelines, and you can check your progress as you're going. So you literally get to say, this thing passed, this thing didn't. And it will pull all of the elements that the thing might apply to. So like when you're checking for all attributes, it will pull all of those images for you into the thing. So you can actually like mark off your progress after you've checked each one of those things. It's pretty awesome. And the other thing that it has going for it is the WCAG guidelines, unfortunately, feel like they were written by a lawyer. So, it takes a lot of detective work or just like a lot of time to understand exactly what they mean if you're reading them at their face value. But Accessibility Insights does a fantastic job of translating that into something that makes a lot of sense. And the last thing up here that I want to recommend, I haven't spent a lot of time with it, but it sounds really awesome, and I actually got it as a recommendation from Jennifer, the previous speaker. And they have a CLI tool. They have a dashboard that you can host on your own that uses the tools under the hood to show you what's working and what's not across all the pages of your site. They have a JSON API that fits with that, so you can customize things. And they also have CI test runner support for continuous integration if you really want to go all out and make that, something that you don't, it has to be accessible to push to production. So that's everything I have for you today. Any questions?
Hands up, I wasn't looking.
Hi, thanks for the great talk. So accessibility, I think a lot of us probably realize is easy to ignore, especially if we don't know somebody or don't have accessibility issues ourselves. So in an agency world, which I know you come from, is this something you see clients asking for very often, or do you as an agency say, hey, we ought to do this, we really should do it, and you have to kind of convince them of the value of that?
That's a really great question. So we have had very few people asking about it, but I'm always really grateful when they do. It's one of those interesting gray areas because even though I'm an advocate for it, we don't necessarily try to push people into paying for it because it does take some, it takes some work, honestly, if you're going all the way there. Does it take double the amount of time for a project? No, no way. Maybe 20 to 30% extra, maybe even less if you're really expert at it. But we've just been trying to get into this for the last few years, so we're still relatively new at it. But no, people don't really know it's a thing. And this is kind of going a little bit beyond your question, but I think that we will see the tide change on this in the next 5 to 10 years. If you think about the ADA laws, so Americans for Disabilities Act, technically that's the law that says that physical businesses, all businesses have to provide wheelchair accessible bathrooms and services so that people with disabilities can use things. And that law, as it reads right now, as people are applying it, applies to websites as well. And people are getting sued, which I forgot to mention, my whole pizza example about Domino's, you actually cannot do that, and Domino's is being sued right now and is trying to push back on it. So I think that the legal area is like a little bit murky, but people are definitely getting sued, and that's both big and small companies. So it definitely makes sense for us to start pushing this way. And I think that the lawsuits will build up enough in the next 5 to 10 years that it's going to become commonplace. And people will know and understand that it is truly illegal not to do it.
Just curious, for those of us that are dyslexic, what do you do on there?
You know, the funniest thing that I've read is that Comic Sans is actually an especially good font for people with dyslexia. So that's my advice. No, I don't remember everything offhand, but I think it has to do something about like even spacing in terms of the font. There are certain fonts that are a little bit better. And I think the contrast ratio in general would help with that too, because you're going to be able to see things a little bit more clearly.
I'm sorry I came in the middle of your presentation. I was just at the university talking about ADA compliance with our app, so it applies. I was curious, I know you were talking about websites, but as far as mobile and ADA, is there a way to like, if they have those different things turned on in the settings, when your app refreshes, it will notice that they turned on one of those accessibility things? Is there a way to like build that into your app to recognize that as like a listener or something like that?
I think there definitely are. It's anything outside of web is not really in my wheelhouse, so I don't know the details, but I do know that the tools like that I was looking at for automating things have support for iOS. They have support for like Windows applications, and I'm sure there are other things even for, you know, native Mac apps too. So there definitely are tools out there, but I don't know enough to tell you the details. Yeah.
Last chance. Any other questions? Okay, thank you, Miranda.